Okay, children, let's start our class 12 physics with chapter 12 atoms. Let me begin with a question. What is atom? As you know, atom is a basic unit of matter that consists of a dense central nucleus surrounded by a cloud of negatively charged electrons. Figure shows the present atomic structure of a carbon atom. In the center, nucleus is present, which consists of positively charged protons and neutral neutrons. Along with that, negatively charged electrons are also present, which revolve around the nucleus. Okay. Next, why do we need to study atom? As we discussed in our introductory video, anything in this universe is made up of matter, and atom is the building block of that matter. All the things that we meet in our daily life is made up of atom. Both living and non-living things are made up of atoms. Okay, on the screen you can see many things: cars, cool soft drinks, ball, charcoal, soap, table, chair, books, tablets or pills, anything from large buildings to small buildings, anything in this universe is made up of atom. So it's very important to study about atom. Okay, let's make an interesting journey through the history of atom. Years back, a Greek philosopher, Democritus, coined the term atom, which means indivisible. Later, in 1805, another scientist, John Dalton, proposed atomic theory. And you have learned about Dalton's theory and his postulates in your previous classes. Later, in 1850, famous scientist Faraday performed the cathode ray tube experiment. Later, in 1897, J.J. Thomson, a great scientist, discovered electrons through his famous discharge tube experiment. From that experiment, he concluded that electrons are present in every atom. He was the first scientist to propose an atomic model. His model was known as plum pudding model. He was a great scientist, but his model has some limitations. So these limitations were overcome by another scientist named Rutherford. In 1909, Rutherford performed gold foil experiment and proposed a new atomic model. So this atomic model were able to overcome the limitations of the Thomson's model. Above all, Rutherford was a student of J.J. Thomson. Okay, again, this Rutherford model also had some limitations which were overcome by another scientist called Niels Bohr. He proposed a new satisfactory model in 1912 which could explain the hydrogen atom or hydrogen spectrum but failed to explain the spectrum of atoms with more than one electrons. Later, in 1924, de Broglie suggested a hypothesis which emphasized the dual nature of electron. According to de Broglie hypothesis, electron has both wave nature and particle nature. We have learned about de Broglie hypothesis in our previous lesson, dual nature of radiation and matter. In 1932, Chadwick found neutron. So this was about the history of atom. So in this session, we are going to discuss some of the atomic models. First, we will discuss about the Thomson's model of atom. Second, we will discuss about Rutherford's model of atom. Again, two more models are there, Bohr's model of atom and quantum model of atom, which will be discussed in the coming sessions. Okay. Thomson's model. J.J. Thomson was the first scientist who proposed an atomic model, and his atomic model is also known as plum pudding model. He was a scientist who proved that cathode rays consisted of negatively charged particles called electrons. We had studied about his discharge tube experiment in our previous lesson, dual nature of radiation and matter. Thomson started to think about the neutrality of atom and also about the structure of atom. When he saw a plum pudding kept on his table, suddenly an idea struck to him. Just like plums are embedded here and there in the pudding, electrons are embedded in the space of positive charge. So he gave his structure of atom, in which atom possesses a spherical shape, in which the positive charge is uniformly distributed and electrons are embedded in it. So this was the model proposed by Thomson. Here you can see the negatively charged electrons are embedded here and there inside a positively charged sphere. And also the number of positive charges and number of negative charges will be equal in number. So the atom is neutral. So Thomson's model could explain the neutrality of atom very well. And you can see the similarity between the Thomson's model and the plum pudding. See how the plums are embedded in a pudding. Just like the plums, the negative charges are embedded inside the positive sphere. This model is also known as watermelon model or raisin pudding model, because in watermelon the seeds are embedded inside that solid sphere. Okay. So this Thomson's model could satisfactorily explain the neutrality of atom, but at the same time it couldn't explain various types of spectra. Okay. So to overcome these limitations, another scientist, our Rutherford, came with a much more satisfactory model. So next we are going to discuss Rutherford's model of atom. A much more satisfactory model was proposed by Ernst Rutherford. Rutherford was a brilliant scientist. He performed many experiments to study the structure of atoms. At the same time, Rutherford was a student of J.J. Thomson. Rutherford investigated the atomic structure through his famous alpha scattering experiment. At the suggestion of Rutherford, another scientist, Hans Geiger and Ernst Marsden, later performed this experiment, and the conclusion of this experiment led to the birth of Rutherford's model of atom. This Rutherford model of atom is also known as planetary model or nuclear model of atom, because in the Rutherford model of atom, the entire positive charge and most of the mass of the atom is concentrated in a small volume called nucleus. So the Rutherford model came up with the concept of nucleus first, because J.J. Thomson proposed that the positive charge is spread uniformly throughout that atom, whereas Rutherford suggested positive charge is not uniformly distributed throughout the atom, but positive charge is concentrated within a small region in the central region of atom. Also, the electrons revolve around the nucleus just like planets revolve around the sun, whereas Thomson proposed that electrons are embedded here and there inside the positively charged sphere. But Rutherford proposed that electrons are not embedded. Electrons revolve around the nucleus just like planets revolve around the sun. Just because of that, Rutherford's model of atom is also known as planetary model or nuclear model of atom. So this figure shows the Rutherford model of atom. Here in the center you can see the nucleus. The nucleus is concentrated within a small region inside the atom, and the electrons revolve in certain orbits around the nucleus. Okay. And Rutherford proposed this atomic model based on his famous experiment, which is known as alpha scattering experiment, or it is also known as gold foil experiment. So next we can discuss about alpha scattering experiment. Okay children, Rutherford proposed this atomic model based on this alpha scattering experiment or gold foil experiment. So we will discuss more about the gold foil experiment, its conclusions, everything in the next session. Okay, thank you.